Welcome back to Millers in Motion. We're back from Mexico. By we, I mean me. And it's the 4th of July weekend. I know you're seeing this a few weeks after that, but one of the biggest requests that I never thought I would get was actually how to smoke a brisket. So if you've followed along, whether it's Instagram, RV Unplugged, or here on the main channel, I get asked a lot about this. I don't know if it's the Texan in me, I don't know if it's the big in me, but anyway, I'm finally going to break down how I cook a Texas style brisket. I've gotten compliments, so I think I do a good job. But that being said, there's a lot of wiggle room, so I'm going to teach you how I do it today. And I'm going to do it using the smoker that we keep on our rig. And yes, I keep a smoker on our rig. It's right, using the smoker I keep on a rig, which is the Grilla Grills Chimp. It's a portable, foldable unit that also has a little bit more size. I have a whole video just over the smoker, so feel free to check it out. This is going to be about the brisket, because in Texas, brisket is king. So there's two main requirements when it comes to smoking a brisket in Texas. Is one, you gotta have a brisket, and two, you have a cold beer. So go grab a beer. This happens to be a Spotted Cow from Wisconsin. I got some of those up there. It's awesome, so I bought a few cases. Grab a beer and let's smoke a brisket. Tasty. So we're actually going to start this cook-off here inside of our kitchen in the RV, because I want to go over a few things, some misconceptions, and a few other things. And then while we're talking about that, we're going to trim the brisket up and get it seasoned and get it ready to go on the smoker, which in my opinion is the most important part, even more than the smoke itself. The smoke's really important, but this is more important. Alright, well, we have shifted inside before we go get the grill ready, because one of the first things you have to be able to do is trim the brisket. So just a quick anatomy of a brisket. This is the fat cap side. This is the meat side. There's actually two different muscles we're working with here. So if you look, you can see how the grain's running this way on the flat, and then the point is this section here. So if you look at the cross section, there's this big fat vein that kind of runs through the two muscles. Well, this is the flat. It's also known as the lean side if you're in a barbecue place. And then everything else up here is called the point, or the moist side if you're in a barbecue place. So those muscles kind of lay like that. And the idea is that you're trying to get them cooked to where that fat in between the two turns to as much a liquid as we possibly can make it. So this is just a good old Walmart. It's about a 12.5 pound brisket. I'm probably going to take about a pound off of it. When you're picking the brisket, what I look for is the least amount of hard fat. So like if I flip this over here, like this piece right here is super hard, we're going to take all that off because it's not going to render. But what I'm really looking for is the kind of fattest lean side possible, because this side's going to cook way before this side is. So between the trim and a few other things, we want to try and get them as close together as possible. So we want to try and get them reasonably close together. So the thicker the flat side, the better off the cook. Now the trim, I'm not going to subject you to the whole trim, but most people leave about 1/3 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch on the back side, or the fat cap side. I take a little more than that. Plus I do a few other little things. So I take off any hard fat. I trim this down to, at thickest, 1/4 of an inch, maybe even a little bit more. I'm not the biggest fan of the fat. It does help moisten and cook the beef, so we do want to leave some of it on. And then the other thing too is if you look through here, in fact I'll spin it, you can see how some of the meat here is kind of grayed off. I'll clean a little bit of that up, and so it doesn't, because that's not going to cook all that great. So let's get to trimming. One thing you definitely want to have is a sharp knife. If you have like a paring knife or something along those lines, that's ideal. And then I, again, take quite a bit off, only because I don't enjoy the fats as much. So I take quite a bit of it off. And you just kind of run your knife along, and if you grab one end of it, you can see how you kind of just peel it back. You'll get a little close in some places, which is fine. I don't want to give it too much of a scalp. So I've got this about where I want it. Maybe take a touch more off of right here. Really close. A little more I guess a little less. I would have preferred a little bit more fat up on the point. I didn't notice that when I was selecting this brisket. So I would have preferred a little bit more fat up in here, but there also was quite a bit of browned meat, and that, to be honest, didn't cook all the well, but if you notice, it's already a lot more even from side to side. So we're not going to take any more off of the top, but we are, when I first started cooking or cutting this up, I noticed that there was quite a bit of browned or grayed meat through right through here. So I actually took a reasonable amount off. Again, it's not going to cook all that great, and any of these little pieces that are kind of hanging up, they're not going to cook all that great either. So the second thing I'm going to think about is kind of how aerodynamic, and I know that's a weird way of thinking about this, but smoke has to roll over this. So this is a different scenario for each smoker. I know how mine works. Mine actually works a little bit more from the center. It kind of runs up the side and then out the stack to the far side. So I want to make this just a little bit more aerodynamic. So the idea here is I'm actually going to curve it a little bit here. And I know that's an odd thing when you're thinking about smoking a brisket, but well, welcome to my brain. And then I'm going to just curve this side a little bit here. And there you go. So now, as you can see, it's a little bit more curved there, so everything should cook pretty evenly. Took a little bit more meat off than I probably would have liked to initially, but that's part of it. Okay, so seasoning. At this point, what we do is you have to remember that there's a presentation side of the brisket and a non-presentation side. Now, does that matter if you're just cooking for backyard? Not really. I still try to cook it that way, though, because it gives me a better idea of the side I want to look pretty. So you have to think, how are you going to want to cook the brisket? Now, in Texas, and in my personal opinion, you cook with the fat cap up. So right now the brisket's upside down. So this is the side I actually want to season with first. So there's a couple of different seasonings I'll use. Secret. One that I tried to make that we're still working out, that we're not going to use today. And then this one, which looks a little different because it's solid black, but this is Hardcore Carnivore Black Beef Seasoning. I like this one for a couple of reasons. One, it's got an activated charcoal in it, so it's kind of like a cheater. It gives you a better bark. Two, it doesn't have a lot of salt in it. So my other go-to is a combination of meat church products called Holy Cow and Holy Gospel. I like those a lot, but they're a little heavy in the salt, so I can't do this trick. Now, this meat as a whole isn't the most tender product. So salt, for the most part, is a meat tenderizer. I do something a little different than a lot of people. So this is just plain Lowry seasoned salt. Now, I do one coating of this, both sides, let it sit for a little bit. And I do not do much. It's a very quick dose. So, again, just kind of a fast little, and that's it. I will hit the sides with it real quick. So if you're going to season all sides. There you go. And then I'm going to flip it and do the exact same thing on this side. Again, nothing much. Just a quick little coating, and then I'm going to let that sit for just a little bit. So after that's set for a little bit, we're going to go back with our all-purpose seasoning. You want to go from a little bit of a height, and you're not going to do too much on this, just a little bit, just to give it some color. You can go pretty liberal, but with the other salt down, you still have to be a little careful. So our presentation side is actually down, so the side I want to season last is going to be up. I'm going to let this sit here for about 15 minutes, flip it, and do it again. Alright, so now both sides are seasoned, so we're going to let this sit for about 15 minutes. So in the interim, we're going to get a little picked up, and then we're going to go get the smoker started, because that does take a few minutes to kind of get going. Okay, so like I said before, for this smoke, I am using the Grilla Grills Chimp. I love this thing. The legs fold underneath it, and it fits actually in the storage of our RV right through that back, there we go, right through that back door where we have that MORryde slide tray. So that's why I like this smoker so much, is I can take it with me. Plus, I can crank up the heat, I can cook burgers on it, I can do all kinds of stuff. But let's get this fired up and talk a little bit about temperature. Okay, so a couple of things. I take this down initially as low as I possibly can go. I'm actually taking it to 185. So I did cook some chicken in there earlier for dinner, so it doesn't have to go as far. It's already up close to 100 degrees just because of the cool down process from the cook from earlier. But what we're gonna do is, we've got it fired up now. I actually have it set at 185. Now, here's the biggest question I always get is what temperature and for how long? Well, smoking is different. Now, I'm cheating on a pellet grill, and I will admit it, but you know what? It's a lot easier. So I'm gonna take it to 185. If you have the ability to use, like Traeger calls it, super smoke, this calls it PUD versus PID. So it's a setting where essentially the temperature can fluctuate more, but you can hit it with more smoke. Use the more smoke feature, especially early on. There's gonna be a point where smoke doesn't matter as much in your cook. It does on the beginning. So what we're gonna do is PUD, which is gonna allow the temperature to fluctuate more, but it's gonna infuse more smoke flavor. And I'm gonna leave it at 185. The reason why I'm leaving it at 185 is because this is a smaller smoker. There's not as much of the grill area that needs to heat up. So because there's not as much of the grill area that needs to heat up, it holds this heat a lot better. So I don't need to crank it all the way up to 225 initially. Now, if I was on a bigger smoker, had something like I had back at the house, or even an offset smoker, then no, I'd probably start at around 225 and leave it there for the duration of the cook. I've learned on the smaller smoker that I go 185 now, and then in a little while, we'll move it up to like 195 or 200, let it go for that for a little while. So I kind of step it up a little bit when it comes to using this one. That is just for my smoker grill. So if you have something different, it's really, really important that you understand how your grill works. Where are your hot spots? Does it seem to cook a little hotter, cook a little cooler? Because of the size of this, it cooks a little hotter, hence why I'm only going 185. So we're gonna let that kind of fire up, get some smoke rolling on it. It's already starting to come out a little bit, and then we're gonna bring the brisket out, get it on, and that's gonna be it initially. We'll show you how to probe and do all that stuff too. Okay, before we put the brisket on, one thing that's very important to state is what type of pellets or wood you're using, as well as what you do to kind of regulate the grill. So right out of the gates, I like to use a post oak or a mesquite for the pellets. I prefer post oak. That's kind of a Texas thing. It's got a high smoke flavor to it. That's just my personal favorite. Mesquite is my secondary backup to that, and sometimes I mix them. Now, if you're cooking something like ribs or pork belly or something along those lines, then you can use a sweeter wood like an apple wood or a cherry wood, that kind of stuff. So, but for brisket, this is what we like. We like that peppery, heavy smoke flavor. So, also, it's important to know that you really should turn the grill on and let it run for a while, because it'll regulate itself. So, like, this grill's been running now for about 30 minutes with nothing in it or on it. And so I'm regulating out, like, it's actually a little high right now at 210, but remember how I said for mine, because I've got that super smoke or pro setting for this, it's going to fluctuate a little bit more, so it's actually on its way down. Plus, when we go to open it up, we're going to let some of the heat out. So let's top off the pellets, make sure we're good to go there, and then we'll put the brisket on. All right, so the next thing too is which way should you position your meat? Again, we've already talked about, I do fat cap up. For me, the firebox is right in the middle. So as far as which side is going to be cooler or hotter, I know that this side's cooler, but it also has a vent on it. So this side's gonna run a little bit warmer. So I want the point down here, and I want the flat down here. So again, the flat's not gonna take as long to cook, the point is. So that's how we're gonna position this on. Also, you're gonna notice me forming up the brisket a little bit. I'm kind of trying to get it in a position that I want it in versus what it's going to naturally want to fall to. One last thing, this is our meat probe. There's a bunch of different versions of this. For me, I just use the one that came with it. So what you want to do, let me grab you. So what you want to do on this is I run it through the hole here. You don't really want it to touch the meat anywhere, so any more that you have of that porthole is perfectly fine. But you want to put it in the thickest part, so which is going to be right between the point and the flat, kind of right in the middle. So we're going to go right where I just said and try to get to about the middle of the meat there. We're going to run that out so we're not touching anywhere. There you go. And we're going to shut that down. Let's go chat over here after I wash my hands. All right, brisket is on, camera is in hand, tripod is in my way. Let's put that back over here. So, now what? Great question, right? So the brisket internal temperature is 66 degrees. The internal temperature of the smoker is 180, and I have it set at 185. So it is starting to do its thing. I can also tell you that we plan on serving this around 6 o'clock tomorrow night. Now, what I would tell you is when it comes to time and temperature, we've already talked about temperature a little bit. I go 185 the first little while, and then from there I kind of grow. When it comes to time, it's whatever it takes. There's some tricks you can do once you enter the stall, which we'll talk about later. But, you know, this is something that we will check on a lot. We'll baby it. Now, the pellet grill allows us to not have to worry too much about it. If this was an offset smoker, I'd pretty much be out here all night with it. So the goal is to have this wrapped up by lunchtime tomorrow. And then we have what I call bonus barbecue. If you're going to fire the grill up, you might as well use it. So I got a little sausage I put on. That's what I eat for lunch tomorrow. I'll throw that on at some point, smoke it up pretty good while I finish off the brisket. But we're pretty much just going to let it sit at 185 overnight. Now again, remember how I said I cheat a little bit? Because it's a pellet grill, this grill does have a Wi-Fi connection to it, so on my phone I'll keep track of it and I'll set alarms, not timed alarms, but temperature alarms. See what I did there? So I'll set alarms for it. Like if it were to hit 165 internal temperature of the probe / brisket, then my phone will go off and I'll know to pop up. One thing I would tell you is you sleep a little lighter on days that you smoke brisket. So you have to be ready to pop up and deal with it at any point. Also, I set alarms for low and high temperature on the grill because that can tell me that maybe I ran out of pellets, maybe I had a power surge. Who knows what could happen? So all those things allow me to keep an eye on the grill. That's about it. So all we do now is kind of clean up, pick up, reset, and just let this go. Also, one last little tip. I cannot tell you how important this one is. Resist the urge to open that. If you didn't touch that till it hit 165 again, bonus. We're not stopped at 165. That's just kind of the next milestone. So we will pick this back up and I will let you know where we go from here as we go. But we're in that stage where there's not a whole lot to do. So we're just going to kind of let it do its thing. I'm going to go get cleaned up, get all of the seasoning off my hand, and get cleaned up around here, pick up after dinner, maybe have a beer, watch some football. There's no football on. I wish there was football on. Figure out what we're going to do for the 4th of July and when everybody's going to come over tomorrow. So let's head inside. I realized I forgot to mention one other thing. A lot of people ask me why I do this because, you know, a brisket this size doesn't make a lot of sense for like Lauren and I. We don't eat enough of it, to be honest. Now, I love barbecue. It's one of those staple foods growing up in Texas that was always around. And I've become what's known as a barbecue snob. I like good barbecue. So I just wanted to learn it for myself. And now that I know how to do it, yeah, we can go to some good restaurants. I've got some buddies that own some amazing ones across the state. But quite frankly, I like mine. That's the best part about barbecuing is you can make it however you want it. Also, if you've been around this channel for any period of time now, you know how big community is to us and finding your people and finding that fellowship with other people and specifically RVers for this scenario. I've always felt that smoking a brisket and inviting your neighbors, whoever they happen to be, over is a big deal. That's how we find community because there is no better fellowship than around a dinner table, especially around a really flavorful, good dinner table. So I throw this on, invite people over so that we can hang out with them and enjoy. So if you ever catch us on the road, all you have to do is ask. I will probably do this again very easily. But if we're going to be way outside the state, tell me before I leave because I will need to find brisket here and bring it with, especially to our Wisconsin and Midwest friends. definitely tell me, because I don't know how to find brisket up in Wisconsin. So that's why we do this, and that's why I enjoy doing this so much. But as you can see, it's a really pretty sunset. Golden hour doesn't look too bad in this new site. But that's going to do it for us for this evening. So again, the brisket's just going to roll. If something happens or changes overnight, I will grab the camera and I will film it. Otherwise, our next stop will be in the morning checking on it. Again, if something happens, I will keep you in the loop, because I'm going to take you all the way from start to finish with this one. So also, if you do try this on your own, I would love to hear how it goes. So tag us on Instagram, that kind of stuff. We would love to see how it goes. I'm a fan of barbecue. Just because I like mine doesn't mean I don't like others as well. See you guys in the morning. Good night. All right, well, one last time before I crash out for the evening, I decided to run out and just put eyes on it. One more quick check. If you notice, I'm ready for bed. The hair's a little wet from a shower, glasses. But everything is hunky-dory. I just made sure we're topped off on pellets. Again, all good, so I'm officially going to bed. So again, I've got alarm set, so if anything goes off overnight, I'll pop up and look at it. And if for some reason I got a feeling, I will just get up and come look at it. So yeah, we will come check it first thing in the morning with you guys. See you in the morning. Good morning. It's early. So we went overnight, no issues with the smoker or anything. We still left it at 185. The internal temperature of the brisket is 154. So at this point, we're gonna bump it up, and we're gonna actually open the lid for the first time since we put it on. So let's take a look at it. Yeah, so like I said, we're gonna bump this up now to 225. So that's gonna get it going, and we're gonna look at it for the first time. All right, she's looking good. So a couple of wet spots, like you see a pool right there, but crust looks really good. So, all right, so we bumped it up to 225. I probably should have done that a little earlier, to be honest with you, but that didn't necessarily hurt anything. It's more of a timing thing now. So, you know, you talk about time and temperature a little bit when smoking a brisket. Again, I probably would have incrementally stepped that up. I probably should have gotten up at about 2 or 3 o'clock this morning, bumped it up a little bit higher, but it is what it is. It's not a big deal that we did it this way. There's nothing wrong with going lower and slower. It just takes longer. What are we looking for now? Now we're looking for the stall. So typically the stall happens around 165 degrees or so. So we're at 154 internal temperature, literally just went up 1 degree as I said that. So we'll keep an eye on it now. We'll watch it about every hour or so. And if I feel like I hit 165 and stop, then that's the stall. So at that point, we'll talk about wrapping. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. We got to get the pups going, and I want to get some breakfast. So yeah, let's go get them squared away and get some breakfast and keep on smoking the meat. All right, well, we are getting ready to work on the brisket a little bit more. It's been about an hour since we got up, literally just enough time to have a couple of cups of coffee and some quick breakfast. But we got to about 165 pretty quick after pumping up the temperature, and it's kind of leveled off. We haven't gone up a whole lot. In fact, it keeps fluctuating between 167 and 168, which means it's hit what we call the stall. This is where the muscle, the brisket itself, has actually kind of seized a little bit, and it's harder for it to continue cooking. So this is the stage where we would consider wrapping it. Now there's a couple different ways to wrap a brisket. You can do foil, otherwise known as a Texas crutch. You can do a kitchen grade butcher paper, which is what we're gonna do, or you can just not wrap it. So you're trying to get to an internal temperature of about 200 to 205 degrees. That's the mission. So unfortunately, when you wrap in foil, it helps speed up that cooking process pretty quickly, but what it also does is it traps all those juices in there, so it softens your bark, essentially. So why you use a kitchen grade butcher paper, this does not have any wax on it or anything, so it's safe for food, is because it'll allow moisture to still come out. So it'll help finish the brisket cooking without really messing up your bark too much. So let's grab the brisket out, put it on the table, and we'll talk about how we wrap and all those types of things. Oh baby. All right, well there she is. She's looking good. Nice dark bark. You know, yeah, she looks good. I don't know how else to describe that. So we still have our presentation side up. So something that we're gonna do here in a second is, oh, you're getting smoked out. Sorry about that. So something we're gonna do is we're actually move the brisket down. Oh, this smells so good. I just caught a whiff of it. We're gonna move it down because when we wrap it, we want this end to stay up. So I'm gonna take my little guard off here. We're gonna shift it this way. There we go. So we want this to just wrap right underneath it. Now, what's really important when you're doing this is you want to get this as tight as you possibly can, because you don't want moisture to pool up or do anything. So and there you have it. We now have a wrapped brisket. So, a couple of things. That's important to remember is, one, obviously there's smoke coming off of this, so sorry. Two, you got to remember which side you're point and which side you're flat. I can feel the flat there. This is the point. Another thing too is these gloves are insulated, so there's actually some guards underneath it. That's how I can touch the very hot brisket. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the point back on the same position. So what we're going to do is we're going to put everything back on in the exact same position, and our tote probe is going to go back into the rough same spot about halfway between the point and the flat. And that's it for now. Okay, so what's next? Well, typically when you pull the brisket out too, you're gonna see the temperature. So if you put the probe back in, you see the temperature drop a little bit, that's normal, because you just pulled everything out of the grill and you let it sit out here for anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes. It took us about 8 to 10 minutes to get it wrapped up, mainly because we're shooting the video. So what'll happen now is that it needs to start that cooking process over again a little bit. So we dropped about 4 degrees in the brisket, which is normal. Once you put that probe back in, also if your probe went back into a slightly different place, that also is a contributing factor. But we're gonna let it run. So there's something to remember at this point now too, is that our smoke is done. And I say that in terms of we're not done, but the smoke portion of it is. So you're not going to gain a whole lot of more smoke flavor. So you're not going to gain a whole lot more smoke flavor from this. Now we don't want to just crank it up to 500 and finish the cook fast, but you can, if you're in a time crunch now, cheat it. So at this point we're going to start thinking about when we actually want to serve the brisket. We're serving this or carving this somewhere around 6 o'clock-ish, so it's a dinner thing. So we went overnight. I'm not in a massive hurry. I'm at 166 degrees internal, so it's already come back up a little bit once that cooking process has restarted, once we got it back on the smoker. So what does that leave us? It is currently a little after 8 a.m. So by noon, at the bare minimum, you want to rest the brisket, which we'll talk more in detail in a little bit, for a minimum of 4 hours. I prefer closer to 6. So as of right now, what we want to do is we just want to try and time it to where we are done right around noon, preferably. Now again, this is where kind of the art form side of this comes into play. It's not as cut and dry as, oh, I can pull it off right at noon if I set it at this temperature. I have to kind of watch it. So I'm at 167, so I have 70, 80, 90, so I got about 30 35 degrees to go. So I always talk in terms of temperature throughout the cook. Again, 167, 168 is our current temperature, and I'm trying to get to about 200 to 205. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm going to leave it at 225 for now, but I'm going to check on it about every hour. Now you can do that by coming out and looking at it, or if you have a smoker that you can do it on your phone, you can check it via that as well. So yeah, I will see you in about an hour to an hour and a half and see where we're at and if we need to raise or lower the temperature to time out to try and be done around lunch. Getting close. I'm going to go inside and have another cup of coffee because it's early. All right. Well, we have hit our target temperature. We're sitting right at 205 degrees, so I'm about to pull it off. But let's talk about the rest real quick before I do that. Why is a rest important? You don't just throw it off and start slicing. Well, as you cook the meat, all the moisture and greases and everything come out of it. So when you rest it, you're trying to get the meat to reabsorb a lot of those juices. That's the mission, that's the goal. So when and how do we rest depends on when we're going to serve the brisket. We're serving it at 6 o'clock tonight. It's just after noon, so it's going to rest for about 5.5 to 6 hours before we get ready to slice it. So there's a couple different things you can do. If you only going to rest it for 4 hours, which is the minimum I would recommend resting it, 6 being a little closer to what you want. 4 hours, you could just wrap in the towel and put it in a normally air-conditioned kind of room temperature room, and just let it sit out on a cutting board, like on top of your stove or something along those lines. If you're going to let it rest longer, you could do a couple of different things. One, you can take the brisket wrapped in the butcher paper and just put it like in your oven or a cooler. If you need it to last even longer, you can wrap it in a towel and then again put it in your oven or a cooler. You're not turning the oven on, you're just using it as something to kind of hold the heat. So the slower you can bring that temperature down, the better off you're going to be, because the meat will reabsorb those juices a little bit more and make it even more tender. So again, brisket's not a very tender meat at all, so the goal is to make it as tender as we possibly can. That's why we went low and slow on the cook here. So we're going to do the Talon oven method. Typically you can do the cooler as well. I don't actually have a cooler, so all you want to do, lay your towel out like so, and we're going to pull the brisket off. Something else you can do too to just make sure it's done is you want to do what's called probe tender. So you're going to take the probe and you're going to randomly stick it throughout the brisket. Now once it goes through the initial paper and you go through, it should feel like a butter consistency. So the probe should just move in. You can also get a regular temperature probe. I've done that before, and just stick it in a couple of places. Again, you're looking for texture, not so much temperature. So, but with that being said, can pull her off. Again, insulated glove. So, and then we're gonna very simply just wrap it up like a burrito. And there you go, get a little brisket, baby. Plop it on there. Take my gloves off because it's hot. We're gonna let the grill just cool down naturally, and then we'll clean it up. And then we're gonna take this in. Throw it inside in the oven, and just let it rest. So the way I process this out, it typically takes anywhere from 20 to 26 hours. This smoke is going to take about 24 hours. That does include the rest. So it's not actually smoking that whole time. It does predominantly that work overnight, and then you kind of push it along throughout the cook the rest of the morning after. So there we go. It's in. It just rests, and we'll see in a little bit whenever we're ready to pull that out and slice it up and see what we did. All right, the payoff, finally. I like having an audience. I look more at the audience than I do here. So after you're done and it's rested and it's time to cut it, just unwrap it. I would recommend gloves, especially if you're going to serve other people. But there's a lot of grease in here, which is good and bad. But Okay, so like we talked about at the very beginning, you have a couple of different muscles here. So remember that fat is still running right through there. So what we're looking for after we got a probe tender in the grill, you see that little jiggle? Kind of like Santa. So at this point, I'm going to check the backside, but all good there. So there's a couple of different methods to actually slice this the right way. You want to go against the grain. So what I did is, if you look here, there's a little notch missing here, so that means the grain's running this way. I did that to kind of start my first cut. But I always like to slice it in half first, right between the two muscles. And there's the payoff. Okay, so flat point. If you look here, you can see that vein right there, but if you notice, there's a bunch of holes in it, so that means that all that fat got rendered, which is a bonus. So technically this portion is still the flat, and this portion up here is the point. And it's kind of the same over here because, again, they do overlap a little bit. Got a good smoke ring. Pretty happy with it overall, but we're going to cut these a little differently. So this side, so we're going to move the point out of the way just for a minute. Also, if you're curious what a burn end is, right there. And we're going to start here. Again, we're going to cut against the grain. I'm going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to get you right there. And, oh yeah. And then we'll pull test. Should come right apart. Yep. Perfecto. I'm going to try it because I can't not. So, that's the flat. When you go to the point, when you slice it, it's going to be a little different. So there's two ways of doing it. You can cut it here first and then this way, but if you notice, you can see the grain here. So it runs differently than the point. So on this one, what we're going to do is we're actually going to slice it this way. So it's always a little different depending on what you're trying to do. It's a love-hate with the point. I love the point, because you can see how tender that is. Lauren's not the biggest fan, but that's what it is. So, that's how I do my brisket. If you decide to try this out, keep us posted. Let me know how it goes. But I'm going to eat, so bye. And bye, Mom, but you're not getting any.